Okay. Yesterday we had finished with the natural sciences and their achievements, um, especially in understanding nature and in understanding natural phenomena and the reasons behind their occurrence. And I had made this argument that the natural sciences, the emergence of this particular discipline, or rather field, also led to the demystification of the nature and universe. Okay, so we it is not a process that has happened completely, and it is a process that um, is still ongoing. There are debates around many notions of the natural sciences. But please remember that when we are talking about natural sciences, we are talking about a combination of both the physical sciences that include uh, physics and chemistry, and also the biological sciences, which are the, what do we say? They are botany and zoology. You can include all life forms in it. So that is the kind of definition of natural sciences that we use uh, in while doing the so-called social sciences. Uh, Today, I would like to pick up the notion of positivism and also the yesterday I first thought I thought that I'll do both positivism and logical positivism, um, but I've decided that I will not be doing things that way. Let me first do positivism and empiricism after that. Empiricism in itself will not take too much time. And then I want to go to the hermeneutic method. Okay, because uh, in a way, if you look at logical positivism, it is an adjustment made to positivism so that people um, don't lose their faith in positivism completely. And it's an attempt to resurrect uh, positivism. So, what we will do, therefore, is that we will go into um, positivism and empiricism. And after that, we will basically look at this whole thing called hermeneutics. But before we do positivism and empiricism, there is something that I must tell you, and that is this essay called I'll do this very briefly. I will not take too much of your time here because anyway, I have to um, do this with the MAs uh, in their class, but I'll not do it in detail there also. I'll break it up and actually I'll do it in a little more detail here than there. I'll just make a mention of it and some of the uh, features of what this is. Now, this is a seminal work of John Locke's. Not many people will tell you that this is the probably the most important work to have emerged in the modern period. The modern period of European history. Okay, this is one of the most important works. It changed the paradigm of thinking. Please remember when we did Plato, I talked to you about how Plato argued that we are all born with innate or inborn knowledge. Innate is a correct word, INNATE. Okay, so that is the argument you find in Plato. And his realm of forms. I hope you remember this. It's in the realm of forms where the souls are. That is where they pick up knowledge. And so when you're born, you're already born with structures of knowledge uh, in your mind. And I had told you that one of the things that you need to uh, remember is that he believed, or rather, his belief that knowledge is inborn is not something that you make fun of, uh, because Noam Chomsky, while he was still a professor of linguistics, uh, before turning into a political activist and a political philosopher in his own right, you would find that Noam Chomsky talks about how there are structures of language in our minds and how they get activated by external stimuli, which is through hearing people speaking these languages. Depending on what you heard or which language you heard, you pick that language up first, and later on you might go on to pick up other languages as well. What makes this possible is the commonality of syntax, semantics, and semiotics. So that is the theory of Noam Chomsky regarding language, and it echoes Plato's idea that we are born with structures of knowledge, because even syntax, semantics, and semiotics, if you look at all these things, they are also structures of knowledge itself. So we are born with all these things in our head. So it is something that will tell you that Plato was not talking rubbish. However, uh, over a period of time, when in Europe and especially in England, we've been through this, so I'll quickly make the point. There were two systems of control operating on the individual uh, in the Middle Ages or the medieval period of European history. The first of this, as I told you, the Roman Church, and the second was the feudal professional guild. Now, both these were operating as systems of control over the individual, And the individual was recognized only as a physical entity, not as a self determining, rational, and um, intelligent person. Okay, the only thing was that I can see you in your physical form, so you're an individual, right? Individual, which means you cannot divide anymore. That's what it means when you talk about an individual. Okay, so if you cannot be divided anymore and you become an individual, your existence in that form is only physical. You're not seen as a unique person with different abilities. Some individuals may have better abilities in certain areas. Like, for example, when we talk about doctors, we talk about going to competent doctors, doctors who have good diagnostic skills, the ability to recognize an illness and prescribe the right kind of treatment for that. So, that kind of recognition is not given to someone. The only kind of recognition is a name, a name, which I should have told you in the morning while doing Louis Althusser. Um, when I told you the two theories, two theses on ideology, in the second, he says, as a physical subject, you know, he says that you're not a spatial or a representational uh, person, but you're a body uh, and a physical subject who can be addressed by a name. You're given a name and you're called by that name and you respond. There was a time, I don't know, it has considerably lessened now. There was a time when I think most of the people in Hyderabad were called Satish. So, in the usual Hyderabadi fashion, uh, if I went out for a walk, people would say, I would hear a voice, Are Satish. And I used to turn to see if somebody was calling me. Then I found out that they're not calling me, they're calling someone else. And so I stopped responding because I think every second person was called Satish at one time. It's a funny thing, these were all people younger than me, mm, but they seem to have disappeared. I don't find that name so common now. Now it is names like Siddharth, Anurag, those kind of names. Anyway, uh, so you are a physical subject, okay? And beyond that, you don't have any recognition in the medieval period. All right, but I have told you the story of how the Roman Church uh, got divided thanks to the Reformation uh, into several Protestant churches, the most prominent of which is the Anglican Church, which is till today headed by the monarch of England and not by a religious leader. So that is a considerable weakening of the uh, power of the church, and the feudal professional guild, which didn't allow you to leave the guild to which you originally belonged, and did and the other guilds wouldn't let you come and join them, even if your guild, the guild into which you were born, let go of you. Other people wouldn't let you in into their professions, right? But I told you that uh, due to taxation, thoughtless thinking, I mean, what am I saying? Thoughtless taxing of people, uh, feudalism also started degenerating. And I told you, when it started degenerating, everybody started getting poor. Everybody started getting poor, and hence you find that feudalism gives way to capitalism. Please remember what I told you when I was teaching you about the nation state. And capitalism believes capitalism in order to what did I press? Yeah, capitalism in order to flourish requires free individuals. And the four freedoms that I talked about, what's happening with my computer? The four freedoms that I talked about, oh my God, what did I hit? Free thinking, freedom of speech, not free speech, please remember that. Freedom of speech, free will, and it has to be written with a capital, otherwise, will as the power to will not come through. Okay, so that always, that kind of a will have to be written with a capital W. And of course, the free. market. So please recollect what I told you uh, in that class about the nation state, about all these things. So capitalism requires free individuals uh, in the sense that they are self-determining individuals. That's why it's free thinking. They don't have to be told uh, that you have to do this, you have to do that. They will decide for themselves as to what they will do and what they will not do. And they will do so taking into consideration their own interests. Interests is used here in two senses. One idea of interest is that which is, you know, um, what you have an aptitude for. And the second form is what is beneficial to you. It is in your interest that I ask you to attend my classes. So when I'm using it like that, what I'm trying to tell you is that it is beneficial for you to attend my classes. Okay, whether it is or not, you people decide. But that is what it basically means. So one thing is I am interested in something. I would like to become a professional cricketer, or nowadays with football being marketed so aggressively, okay, in a nation that hardly played football, the Star Sports Network brought the English Premier League. So we have people who are interested in that, and you have people who have favorite teams. Some people are fans of Liverpool. Some people are fans of uh, Manchester United. Some people are fans of Manchester City. Some are fans of Arsenal and some of Chelsea. And I used to think, why are people fans of Liverpool? I can understand that if you're a Liverpudlian, people from Liverpool are called Liverpudlians. If you are a Liverpudlian, then perhaps you will be a fan of Liverpool. If you are a Manchurian, incidentally, somebody from Manchester is called a Manchurian, not the Manchurian of the Chinese cuisine. As you will probably like either Manchester City or United, but why should we like these? And I think somebody heard me say these things because other networks also started showing the Italian league, which is the Serie A, and the uh, Spanish football league. Uh, what is that called now? I have forgotten. Um,
La Liga.
La Liga. Thank you. Thank you very much. La Liga is what it is called. And they also started showing uh, the Dutch league. And so you have these various things. And off late, people have formed football clubs on the lines of these clubs that we find in Europe, in India. And there is a Hyderabad football club, there's a Bangalore football club, there's a Goa football club, and these people are signing foreign players. In my time, football was around. There used to be, when my time, meaning when I was very young, there was this league called the Rahim League, uh, which was played for about 6 months in a year. And various local football teams like the Andhra Pradesh Police and City College Old Boys, so there were teams like this, local teams that participated in the Rahim League. And today, football is being marketed. Uh, I think once they get saturated with football, then they might just turn back to hockey again, which supposedly is our national game, but nobody seems to know much about it anymore. Anyway, so this is one kind of interest, and that is also as important as um, the interest which is beneficial to you. Okay, because if you're interested in football, if people inculcate an interest in football, then it becomes marketable. And if it becomes marketable, then people will make money out of it. They'll make money out of it. Okay, so that is the reason why uh, the both the forms of interest are those which are important. Freedom of speech, so that you state what you want, free will, so that you decide for yourself what you would like to buy, what you wouldn't want to buy, how much you would like to pay for something, and the free market. So let's not go through all these things again. Okay, so you have this free thinking and all this, all these things. Yeah, all these things emphasize the necessity for human rationality to flourish, because that led to the scientific method and its associated developments. So we are talking about these things in the context of we're talking about these things in the context of uh, European society, but uh, thanks to colonialism, it came to other things as well. Now, all these changes also led to a paradigm shift in thinking. Oh God. Locke changed our perception of the human mind. According to Locke, at the time of birth, the human mind is a tabula rasa, an empty tablet of stone on which nothing was engraved. So look at it as a as an empty paper on which you can imprint things. In fact, when we were young, there was a blotting paper. Is it still available? Have you heard of it? Blotting paper? BLOTT. Hello? Yeah,
No,
no? See, a blotting paper was there at the time when we used to use fountain pens, okay, in which you had to fill up ink. Uh, in my childhood, these ballpoint pens, which the British, by the way, call biros, BIROs, they were not legal. You couldn't write a check with a ballpoint pen. Okay, you had to write with a fountain pen. So we had to fill ink. So if the pen was leaking, or if you had filled it too much, and if the ink fell around, then you would find a particular kind of paper which you put on the uh, spilt ink, and it blotted, meaning that the ink was absorbed by that paper. So that's why it was called blotting paper. And if somebody had a very good memory, people used to say, this person has a memory like a blotting paper, which means, you just absorb everything like a blotting paper does, and therefore you have a very good memory. Okay, so he calls it tabula rasa, something which is in the nature of an empty paper. And then he goes on to say that data is imprinted on the human mind through the senses, and cognition is what makes sense of this imprinted data. Cognition is what makes sense of this imprinted data. So, what does this mean? This means that the world is external to us and consists of objects and things which we have to internalize. In order to do this, we require a few things. What are they? First and foremost, we require observation. We need to observe the world. We need to observe the phenomena that are taking place around us. Okay, so that is the first thing, observation. Second, you have to have some kind of internalization. And all this will culminate in verification, which is the backbone of the scientific. Okay, so you have to observe things, you have to internalize them, and then verify. Even today, you apply for a passport, somebody comes to verify if you are actually living in the address that you have given as your residential address. Somebody comes to verify that. Similarly, um, you will also find that, sorry, you will also find that people come, if somebody dies at home and you report that death at the local municipality office, then somebody comes and conducts an inquiry to ascertain if somebody died in that house and did they die of natural causes or were they murdered? No. So somebody comes to verify that. And once that verification is done, then only you get this death certificate, birth certificate. If somebody is born at home nowadays, at one time birth certificates were not very important. Nowadays, if anybody is born at home, that also has to be reported. That person will come and see and make a note and give a birth certificate. If you're born in a hospital, the data goes from the hospital and you have to go to the nearest municipal office and you have to collect the birth certificate. All this is done after verification. I want you to remember this word, verification. Okay, so that's why I'm saying it is a backbone of the scientific method. Okay, no knowledge is accepted as scientific knowledge unless and until you can show proof. You can show proof of its validity, and it is through verification that the proof and validity of something are determined. So that is how the scientific method grew with this new paradigm of thought that John Locke had initiated. I'm sorry. So that's how the scientific method grew. And like I said, it succeeded to a great extent in at least taking care of some of the things that used to be considered uh, mysteries or were wrongly presented as knowledge in holy books of some religions. And I'm sorry, you will therefore find that the natural sciences, for the sake of uh, veracity, veracity is truth with a small t, veracity, and for the sake of validity, they relied on verification. And this brought in knowledge which was indubitable, indubitable, INDUBITLE, indubitable is without doubt, something that you needn't doubt. Now, seeing the success of the natural sciences, some people decided that why shouldn't this be applied to human society? We should apply the scientific method to human society, and through the application of the scientific method to human society, we should have uh, complete knowledge of what human society is and how it functions. Okay, so I think I have to buy a computer with a touch screen and a pen with which you can write. It'll be much simpler than this cumbersome thing. Okay, so we have to look at the idea of application of the principles of the scientific method to the understanding of human society so that we can have reliable and certain knowledge about the functioning of human society and thereby be in a position to prove things, then to verify things, and also to predict things. Predict is not astrological, okay? Like you can predict every summer, or rather every year, the months of April and May are the worst months of summer. We know that as a scientific fact now. We know how the monsoons are formed and how the rains come. We know those things, right? So we can predict. So either the Indian Meteorological Department, IMD, or this new organization called SkyMet. Uh, this year, for example, they have said a normal monsoon will happen. So they study certain parameters, and it is through the study of these parameters and their functioning that they make their predictions. Okay, and it is not a very exact science still, and probably will never be, but it is a science nevertheless. So people wanted to duplicate or replicate the success of the scientific method in understanding the processes of nature to be applied to the human society and have the same kind of results, which is having certain and reliable knowledge, ability to predict, ability to, first and foremost, verification and then prediction. So all these things were considered as being very important to the creation of a social sciences system, and the social sciences themselves were considered as important because that, people said, will give a good idea of how human society functions. And if you have a good idea of how a human society functions, then you'll have better governance, you'll have better life, you have better everything. That is what the idea was. So, in earnest, quite a few people took their inspiration from John Locke and how he had predicted that capitalism would be a solution to the problem of poverty, and how he talked about knowledge that could be built up and would be of great use. Uh, so, taking all these things uh, into consideration, people started trying to apply all the principles of the scientific method to the study of society. But unfortunately, this did not result in the replication of the success of the scientific method in the study of nature. This was not replicated in the study of human society. Human society continued to be continued to elude easy explanations. It continued to elude uh, predictability. It continued to elude any kinds of patterns of behavior. So, at that particular time, people said, should we stop using the scientific method in the study of uh, human society? Should we stop trying to understand human society in a scientific manner? And you had a Frenchman by the name of Auguste Comte who disagreed with the idea of giving up on the creation of social sciences or a science of society. Okay. And since the mood of people who attempted to understand society using scientific principles was something which was not very positive. It People were beginning to lose uh, their interest in the idea of creating social sciences. Uh, Auguste Comte decided that he will launch a movement called the Positivist movement, also called Positivism, to imbue society with a scientific understanding by using the scientific method. Now, what is it that Auguste Comte wanted to do? After all, people tried to do the same thing and they failed. Auguste Comte wanted to identify, before creating a social science or the social sciences. For some time, let's use it in singular, a social science. Um, Before creating that, he wanted to identify what was obstructing the creation of the social science. What was it that stood in the way of application of uh, the principles of social of the scientific method. And what was it that was coming in the way of the creation of a proper and reliable science of society? So, in his study of the different variables, I hope you remember what a variable is. I had talked to you about variables before. Hmm? Does anyone remember what a variable is?
Something which changes.
Hmm?
Something that changes
Something that changes?
is variable.
Uh, no. A variable is a measurable aspect of a proposition. And what is it that you measure as to how much that variable contributes to change? So, variable is not something that changes itself, that is also there, but it is also something that contributes to change. And I gave you the example of a film. I hope you remember that. I told you that if you wanted to change people's attitude towards war, and you pick up 10 people, put 10 people in a controlled group, which means that they don't get to see this film on war and the terrible things that it did, especially the Second World War. 10 people see that, 10 people don't see that, and all of them were pro war at the beginning. I called it a pretest score. And if all of them believed in war, and you show 10 people this war, and they start believing that war is not good, when they see that so many people die in inhuman and subhuman conditions without dignity, and they die horrible deaths. So you take a post test score, and if the 10 people who have seen the film have changed their mind about war and now consider war as not a good thing, and the controlled group continues to believe that the war is a good thing, then basically you will say that the variable that contributed to the change in the attitude of 10 people was this film on Second World War. That is how you use variable. But you can also have a study which will be like this. Same thing. There is a control group, all believe in war, and then you find out at the end that the 10 people who saw the movie became pacifists, but even the controlled group became pacifists, which means the movie was no longer the variable that contributed to the change in attitude. So now you have to look for what that variable was that led to the change in attitude, even of the controlled group. So that is how you talk about a variable. A variable is that particular concept or a thing that contributes to change. So, Auguste Comte and his followers, who are simply called the positivists, they studied the variables involved in the attempts that were made at the creation of a science of society or a social science. And what did they find? They found that there were two variables. Okay, so they had identified these two things. He said these are not used in natural sciences, they are used in the attempt to create a social science, and these are the ones that are hindering or standing in the way of the emergence of a social science. The question now is why? Okay, so the answer that is given by Auguste Comte and his followers is that Jesus, history was indefinite, as was philosophy. So, what is indefinite? They are indefinite. Okay, so there's no definitive history, is what their argument was. We know I spoke to you this morning about the contentions that are there about the Aryans. Okay, the so far dominant school, which is branded as the leftist school by the rightist historians, they basically say that the the leftists, the so-called leftists, like Romella Thapar, especially, they say that the Aryans did not originate in India. They came as small bands of tribal people and they settled down and in India. So you have this one particular theory that Aryans came probably from the plains of Hungary and Germany through the Central Asian region into India. That is a theory that is given by people like Romela Thapar. And you have the rightist historians saying that the Aryans originated in India. They have now started using as evidence uh, remote sensing uh, picture taken by a NASA satellite, which shows that there was a river like Saraswati. Okay, today we call it the Triveni Sangam in Allahabad, which is now called Prayagraj. So the Triveni Sangam is rivers, the Ganga, the Yamuna, and the Saraswati. You can see the Ganga and the Yamuna. They, you can see them flowing together. Allahabad is the place where, you know, the Yamuna is actually a tributary of the Ganga. So it joins it there. But there is no Saraswati. So people said it's an underground river. Okay? It's an underground river. This is what people argued for many decades. But this picture shows that there was a river flowing towards the Ganga and the Yamuna. It seems to have dried up, and then they have done radiocarbon dating to establish the time when this river was flowing. And it goes back to the 12th century BC or something, BCE, sorry. And so they use this as evidence of Aryans having originated in India. To me, it's still unclear as to how the establishment of the flowing of a river uh, is evidence of the Aryans having originated here. The answers that I'm given by these right wingers is that they say that if you do the dating, you'll see that Romila Thapar's dating says these people were not here at that particular time, but uh, the river existing and the existing of a community of Brahmins called the Saraswat Brahmins shows that the Saraswat, because they were people who originated on the banks of the Saraswati, and so they said since they are called Saraswat Brahmins, so the Aryans must have originated here. It's a very apocryphal argument in my mind. doesn't say anything substantial except that there was once a Triveni Sangam. That's the only conclusion that you can draw. The rest are all, in my opinion, spurious, dubious conclusions that are being drawn. And I'm being purely academic here. Okay. Uh, I'm not a left winger. I'm not any winger. I don't have wings. Anyway, so if you look at history, history is contentious. Even if you come to modern history, if you take 1857, the British call it the Sepoy Mutiny. What happened in 1857 when the soldiers of the British Army, who were basically Indians, uh, refused to use the new Springfield rifles, and because of the fact that their cartridges, they had to take the cap off with their mouth before it was inserted into the barrel of the rifle. And it was rumored that beef or fat from a cow and fat from a pig were used to put that. So they saw it as beef and pork. The Muslims will not eat anything to do with a pig. Neither do most Hindus, but Hindus do eat. They might not eat cows, but they do eat beef that comes from buffaloes and things like that, animals like that. And the Hindus, because they said we don't want, if it has come from, um, if it was something that came from a cow, then we wouldn't, it'll be eating it if we try to take it out with our mouth. So they refused to use these rifles. And seeing this as an opportunity, uh, many kings, nawabs, sultans, all of them got under the leadership of the Mughal emperor and waged a war against the British. Now, the British don't want to acknowledge this. That there was a Tantia Tope, there was a Rani of Jhansi, there was a Peshwa in Gwalior, that, and there was, um, what do we say, Marathas, and the other Mughal emperor. All these people, they discount them. They say it was just a Sepoy mutiny, an affair which was internal to the British Indian Army. Okay. Now, if you read R.C. Majumdar, he calls it the first war of Indian independence. The reason why he calls it that is because he says all the Indian kings joined. But Majumdar is contradicted by Bipin Chandra. Bipin Chandra says there was no political nationalism, and the absence of political nationalism means that there was no concept of a political India. And without having a conception of a political India, how can you have the first war of Indian independence? So he says it should simply be called the Great Revolt of 1857. Okay, so within Indians, there are people who are disagreeing with how to characterize that particular event. So that is the indefiniteness of history. So Auguste Comte is seriously possessed of this, and he says history, due to its being indefinite and due to different reporting or reportings of the same event, is something that introduces uncertainty.
అమ్మ ఇచ్చిందని చెప్పినట్టు ఏమి ఇచ్చిందంటే ఏమో నాకు తెలియదు అన్నట. ఓ బాంబు వేసిందని చెప్పలే ఇంకా పోపోయింది. ఎవరికి ఇష్టం? అయితే ఏదో అనుకున్నాడు వాడే.
That's how Rachna is listening. Yeah. So he says that is the reason why history is standing in the way of a social science with definite knowledge, with definite contours, because there is indefiniteness in history. Okay? Because of too many different kinds of reportings of the same event and not having any methodology by which you can say this is the true account, this is the accurate account, and the others are not accurate accounts. There is no such mechanism to establish the veracity of one over the others. So history brings indefiniteness. Philosophy, as far as the Greeks were concerned, was the same as science. But starting with Auguste Comte, we have this thing of philosophy being seen as speculative. Okay? Speculative because it is something that relies on suppositions. Okay? If you look at the Pythagorean times, if you look at Plato, if you look at all these people, you see their philosophy is constructed on suppositions, just as mathematical and geometrical theorems are constructed. And it is purely through deductive reasoning, that you establish the truth of something. It may not have an empirical equivalent in society. So that, according to Auguste Comte, is the speculation. Philosophy speculates because it is based in, he doesn't even call it suppositions, he calls it presuppositions, which are before suppositions. So he says it is grounded in presuppositions, And by using a deductive methodology that is used in mathematics, you're establishing the proof of something only as a rational construct, but not as an empirical construct. Not as an empirical construct or a social reality. Okay, it might be rationally correct, but as a social reality, it is mere speculation. So he said, these are the two things, the two variables that stand in the way of the emergence of a social science. So what do we have to do then? How do we get around the problem? Auguste Comte says, just get rid of history and philosophy from the study of human society. Don't involve these two subjects. Study without these. And the problems of uncertainty, the problems of establishing the veracity of something will automatically disappear. That is what is said by Auguste Comte. So, positivism as a movement wanted to get rid of history and philosophy from the study of human society and establish a social science that would replicate the same results of the natural science. Stop here today. Any questions? Refutations?
Sir, but how can we ignore history completely? Because it forms the base of understanding of the human life before it.
Valid, valid. But I'll pick that up tomorrow because it requires a long-winded explanation.
Okay.
But in answer to the point that you raised, let me tell you that that is the reason why positivism failed. Okay, you have a history of science, right? Not only do you have a history of science, you also have a philosophy of science. So neither of the variables are actually dispensable. Neither of them. And that is the reason why the positivist movement failed. And that is the reason why people like Vico, Giambattista Vico, and Herder re-inculcated the necessity for studying history, but they were seized of the problem that history was creating. They did see the point being made by Auguste Comte that yes, there is no definitive history. So therefore, they come up with another suggestion. But before I come to that, Tomorrow, I have to discuss with you the notion of objectivity. Okay? Uh, because what Auguste Comte is trying to do when he's talking both about a natural science and a social science is that he's talking about knowledge that is constructed objectively. So we have to first discuss that. Okay? Uh, can it be constructed objectively? What does objective mean? We have to look at that first and only then come to the question that you have raised. Because those who support history can see the point that he makes, but they find fault with him in using the term objective and objectivity. That, they say, does not exist even in the natural sciences. But we'll talk about that tomorrow because it's a bit of a lengthy thing. But I'll finish this off tomorrow. And day after tomorrow, I'll go on to the hermeneutic, which is a part of your curriculum. So since the three names that I see are MA students, please tell your friends that if they want to learn about the hermeneutic method, they should attend these class, the day after tomorrow's class, and maybe the one after that as well. It can't be done in one class. It'll have to be done in two classes. Okay. So any other?
Yes, sir. So why the term positivism? I think I already asked you, but I tend to forget why the word positivism is used.
Because people had become negative in the in their, I mean, people set out with uh, real zeal and zest to create a social science, and then they found that they were not able to create it, so they were very crestfallen, and they developed a certain negative thinking about the possibility of creating a science of society. They started thinking negatively. They said, is it possible at all? Maybe not. Maybe we cannot create a science of society like we have created a science of nature. So, in order to make these people buck up and start believing in the idea that a social science can indeed be constructed with the same attributes of a natural science, in order to revitalize the sagging spirits, uh, Auguste Comte took recourse to this term positive. He said, don't look at it negatively, look at it positively. If we understand where the problem is, then we have conquered it. And we can understand where the problem is, what is standing in the way of the creation of a social science. We can definitely do it and create social science. That is why he called it positivism. Let's look at the whole thing positively. That let's do it. kind of thing. Before football matches and before now cricket matches, people form a scrum and they say, we can win this match. We can do this. And, they reiterate positive ideas. And in doing so, they think they are actually uh, creating the possibility of victory. I used to do it with my rock band. I I used to, because we had a couple of people who were irregular to practice, and my way of telling them, and if I told them, see, rock bands and all these are voluntary associations. So my way of telling them that you have to be regular is that we used to form a circle and we used to say, we shall practice regularly. We shall play a proper concert. We shall make sure that the audience will appreciate us. And then we used to practice. And even before a concert, before we set out for the venue, we used to practice in my garage. So we used to gather in the garage and we used to say, we won't make mistakes, because our drummer was prone to going off here and there. So we used to say, we won't make mistakes, we won't forget lyrics, we won't forget the breaks. Okay, remember all this. So let's go and do a proper show that will win the admiration of everyone. So imbuing that positive spirit, that is what Auguste Comte was doing. And mind you, it works. I've seen it work in my rock band.
Right, but it didn't work for him,
No,
and
it
as you
didn't.
said, it failed.
Yes, it failed. But I'll get into
Just
the
because
reason.
he was positivist, but reality was something else.
Yes, and not only that, what he thought he identified as the causes for the failure were not the causes for the failure. The causes of failure lay elsewhere. It lay in the term um objectivity. That's where the failure was. Okay.
Right. So, sir, can this be called as an ideology or not? Did it had that scientific, rational
Positivism
approach?
can be called an ideology. It
Okay.
can be called an ideology. Positivism is an ideology. Liberalism and those are not ideologies.
Mhm.
Yeah, that I'll explain tomorrow. Why they are
Yes,
not
sir.
ideologies, that I'll explain tomorrow. But positivism can be called an ideology in the loose sense of the term, not going into the uh, deeper sense of the term. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Sir,
Yeah.
magnified thinking and deductive method, is there how they are different, sir, one another?
Magnified thinking and deductive method is a method. Magnified, what you're calling magnified thinking is actually not magnified thinking, but it is actually called scaled up thinking. Okay, which is, for example, you are trying to manufacture an aerodynamic car. So what do? You first freeze on the design, and then you make a model of that car, which is a scale model. It'll be, say, 1:18. That is usually the scale model. And wind is, it is put in a wind tunnel, and the wind tunnel blows wind onto the car model at a certain speed. Okay, at a certain speed, and people will see how much drag coefficient is being generated by that design of the car if you anticipate the movement of that car through this wind, which is a mathematical calculation. After they do that, then they scale it up to the full-sized car. They scale it up to the full-sized car, and they put the calibrations of wind speed, car speed in the opposite direction, now to the full size of the car. So from a 1:18 size model, which will be about this much, to a full-sized car, you will basically calculate the drag coefficient. That is called scaling up. You can also scale down. It's not magnified thinking, it's scaled up thinking. But like I said, you can also have its opposite, which is scaled down thinking. It's not magnified. Magnification is a physical thing. When you put a magnifying glass, then that which is this big will look this big. That is magnifying, making something look bigger through an optical illusion. Though it is done scientifically, you grind the uh, glass in a particular way so that it magnifies the image, but it is an optical illusion. Whereas the deductive method is not an illusion, it is a method, and it is something that is based in logic and rationality. If you're looking at a very Indian concept of magnified thinking, that is where you blow up a problem. This is a very Indian usage, uh, where you blow up a problem beyond its actual proportions in your mind. You magnify the problem in such a way that it appears to be more daunting than it really is. So you'll say, don't blow up that problem into such a big picture. Don't do that. Don't magnify it. Don't magnify that picture in your mind so much that it scares you. But that's a purely Indian usage. You don't find this usage anywhere else in the world. You don't find it anywhere else in the world. So what you're calling magnified this thing is scaling. Yeah, you're saying something. Sorry. Yes, Rachna.
No, sir. Yeah, I got now.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Sir,
Raksha.
said, did Comte say that we should ignore history and philosophy, or
Or
he wanted to club this history and philosophy with natural science?
no, he wanted them removed from the study of society. He thought that history and philosophy don't exist in the natural sciences, which is an erroneous assumption. And it'll become obvious to you tomorrow why it is an erroneous assumption. He wanted to eliminate them, not club them with natural sciences. He wanted to eliminate them from social sciences so that they will be like natural sciences, which he thought did not have the involvement of history and philosophy. Does that answer your question?
Yes, okay, sir.
Anyone else is left? Hmm. Any questions, Mr. Prashant, Rakesh? Hmm?
No, sir.
No, we know everything. Okay, then tomorrow we'll continue with this and try and finish off so that we can start doing hermeneutics. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.